Hey, I'm Cassie Pierce. I'm in Muskogee, Oklahoma, which is in the eastern part of the state, farming vegetables and cut flowers on a couple of acres, selling into my local farmers market and also an on-farm stand. I've been certified organic since 2014, which was our second season growing. So now in my 13th season, and farm seems to be doing great. I have a lot of challenges I want to overcome, but feel pretty stable at this point.
Yeah, you reached out after hearing the episode that we did with Chaz in Houston, and I really liked what you wrote in the email. So you said, I'm really intrigued by the disconnect I'm sensing between my own experience and some of the assumptions floating around the farm podcasting and blogging world, especially amongst young growers and what's possible on a small farm. When you say that and when you think about this, what's the first thing that comes to mind as part of the disconnect between, I'll say, the narrative that's out there and the reality that you see in Oklahoma?
Yeah, I think it's several different things. The first thing that always comes to mind when I think about this topic is watching other growers, like young growers especially, near me or hearing about their stories. And they're starting a farm and they have a very specific vision in mind of what they have to do. They have to have this specific style and this specific list of crops. And if they vary too far from that, they're not following the best advice. And then I've watched some young growers quit farming, and it felt like it was mainly not because they were really failing, but because there was like I said, an image in their mind of this ideal of profitability, high margins. And I think what I'm seeing with your conversation, Diego, with Alec, is you're showing a really realistic approach where Alec has some ideas in his mind about what's the best practice for approaching a farmer's market and a market garden, but he's also being very adaptable. And I think that adaptability is like super key. And I don't know that it gets enough play, that you got to start somewhere, but then you're always just going to be adapting to your actual local conditions and your actual personal ability and personal preference. And then that may not look like what another farmer is doing. And I think a lot of us expect that if we're not doing what someone else is doing, then we're doing it wrong.
Yeah, it's something I have heard through the years from farms I've visited, farmers I've talked to, is they interpret what maybe I'll say some of the louder names say is gospel
Mhm.
and a literal recipe. And it's like, oh, so and so tried that and they followed so and so's method and it didn't work. And I've always tried to think about it like, yes, of course, that's a starting point, and then
Mhm.
you adapt. So your critique isn't, it's not that high value crops or high margin crops don't work. It's just they might work in your location and they might not. You just can't force the issue, try and put the square peg in the round hole. And if it doesn't work, throw in the towel. You need that next phase of pivoting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you just can't be too dogmatic about an approach or a style because it might not work on your land. It might not work for you personally. And I think what I'm doing is not, it's probably on the profitability side per crop or per acre or whatever. It may not be what anyone would aspire to if they looked at it on paper or compared it to someone else's. But I feel like I have a really comfortable existence on my farm financially, but also in how much time it takes to do what we do, how much time it takes to achieve the amount of production that we achieve. And I think some of that is just having a little bit more relaxed approach to what I must do, what I have to. I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
No, it does. And I think it's tough because you use dollars for comparison, and that is a metric. And we use that to say, how well am I doing relative to
Mhm.
somebody else? And I've thought about this a lot lately because I've talked to a lot of business owners and other spaces. I was going to write about this weekend, but I met somebody who had a really successful business, totally unrelated to farming, and they were clearly doing really well, but they were home 5 days a month, so never saw their
Mhm.
kids. The thought I had is that's the danger of looking at success on a one metric scale. In that case, what's the numbers? right?
Mhm.
He might not even have been that successful, but I just made this assumption in my head. And I think we do that
Sure.
hearing and Instagram things and videos and courses. It's wow, look how good this person's doing, but you don't know the whole story. Maybe they're just not pleasant. So would you say that your perspective, I found a farm style and farm business that fits the lifestyle that works for me in my location? Is that the gist of it?
Maybe you're more qualified that I think I am finding more and more by adapting the style that I have freedom to create the lifestyle that I want. Whereas if I had kept, and I'll say, I think when I first started farming, I wanted financial success at a very specific level. I wanted to hit certain sales figures and keep growing. And I thought I needed to probably eventually sell into a bigger city. Like I'm less than an hour from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And in my mind, I had first 8 years, honestly, thought that's where I have to go. I have to get to that point at some point, or I'm really not successful. And little by little, our local market grew with my ability to grow the crops in step with that. And yeah, basically what you said is true. It has worked in a fairly small city to have a pretty diverse array of crops, more diverse than the advice than I've typically heard that people don't think is manageable. Uh, and yeah, I'm finding that as long as I don't keep grinding and keep pushing and trying to get to some next level, I'm able to take afternoons off and I'm going to the lake more often and I'm seeing my friends and family a little more often. And I still want to do better at those kind of personal goals, but it's working. And that's including not really taking super seriously the advice to find a more populated market and narrow down to just maybe a couple handfuls of the most profitable crops. It's not that I've ignored that advice. I think it's great advice. I think I said that maybe in the email. Great advice for a new grower because you don't want to get yourself in a situation that's totally unworkable and then have nowhere to go in terms of a market that's too small or you don't put enough time into learning to grow the crops that really are going to pay your bills because you're running after everything that everybody else wants you to grow or whatever.
Yeah, and I definitely want to unpack the crops and things you grow. And I think you're right. It's a starting point. Like somebody, you have to, whether you do anything, you're baking bread or starting a business, you have to work off of something that has been proven to at least work and
Absolutely.
start there. You can't go Gordon Ramsay if you've never stepped in a kitchen before and just try and freestyle it like you're on some game show. And I think farming's the same way, right? There's some models that, okay, this works for a swath of people. If it's a
Mhm.
profitable crop, you have a chance of selling it. And you're right, you don't want to start the other way, because especially if you're starting with limited capital and you burn that on stuff that you can't make money on, it's
Absolutely.
almost like even harder to dig out. So when you started, you said you had these more lofty financial goals. Did you, and you eventually pulled that back, it sounds, and then grew as your market grew. Did
Mhm.
your, if you have your business here, your lifestyle here, did your business or your lifestyle have to pivot and bend and flex towards the business? Because it's one thing if I say, hey, I need to make, I'm totally making this number 100 grand a year because I know these are my expenses. And if I don't get there, like we got to move to a cheaper house.
Mhm.
And so you could be okay, like slowing down, but then lifestyle takes it. Did you have to do that, or was that kind of part and parcel of it?
I think when we first started the farm, so I started the farm with my ex-husband and I've been doing it on my own since 2020 now. But both of us, when we started, were working off farm. So a lot like what you're doing, Alec, your family needs that income and you're getting that guaranteed check and then trying to get something going on the side that you could jump into at some point. We did that from 2013 to 2017. I worked either one or two part-time jobs and my ex was working as well off the farm. And so those 4 years, we were, Alec, what you're doing right now, you should be very proud, by the way, at least from what I've seen in your first, up through your first couple of markets. It seems like a huge accomplishment for your first year. And we probably never even got to where you are now in our first 3 years, say. We were building a house and working other jobs, but we were building the farm on the side. And so I would say to your question, Diego, we had the lifestyle we wanted, but only because we had off-farm income. But we also we were pretty frugal people, and I still am myself. And so I'm aware that the lifestyle that I have may not be enough for some people, and that's okay. But I've always, all along the way, honestly, even back then when we were doing the farm on the side and scrambling to get to work every morning after watering the greenhouse, whatever, financially, I've always felt pretty okay about what the farm was providing, even though over time we were just inching upward in terms of our revenue.
When you
But I don't, yeah, go ahead.
When you made that jump in 2017 around there to go from part-time to farm, was that a like part-time income gets totally turned off or now fully dependent on the farm? Okay.
Yep.
At that point, where were you like on the confidence scale of the farm? Because I think that's something that Alec and I have ping-ponged back and forth. Were you like, was this thing pretty far down the tracks? It was moving at a steady speed and you're like, all right, just jump on, like we're good to go. Was it still in a white knuckle? Maybe we're having to push the train a little bit. How comfortable did you feel when you made that jump?
Yeah, pretty comfortable. My husband at the time had part-time income. So maybe not comfortable enough for both of us to do it at the same time back then, but I felt like it was pretty clear to me now is the time. And it wasn't because I hated my job necessarily, or there was no kind of negative push. It was really more just, man, the farm is begging for more attention and it's got more to give in terms of what we could earn. And we did. I think we doubled our revenue the year that I went full time on the farm. And I think it was a combination of someone being able to devote full time hours to it, but also it was poised to do that. It was ready to be a little bigger time.
So gut feel, past
Yeah,
experience.
definitely mostly gut feel. That I don't think there was any math involved at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now, as you sit here today, 13 years in, sounds like you're successful, enjoying the life, enjoying the workload. Are you farming? Is it just you? You have staff?
Yeah, so it's me managing it. My parents, my mom and stepdad they retired from their jobs, moved onto the farm in 2016, and they have been helping ever since. They have specific tasks that they help with. So they're not just general labor. They don't really come out to the field much. They're mainly wash pack and they help me with market. We do transplanting together with our water wheel transplanter. And so they're like great at those jobs. And really, I have no mental burden for those tasks because they just own those. And so that's a huge help. And I think that's a big part of the success of the farm is it being a family group a little bit. Even though they are older and there's a lot that they don't want to do and they're needing to slow down, they're still very reliable help. So it's myself and them kind of part-time and seasonal. And then I just brought a call it a part-time partner onto the farm. He's only doing a couple days a week on the farm, but he's very knowledgeable. He's not just labor. He's a longtime friend that used to have his own farm for, I think, 10 or 15 years, did some market gardening, got out of it, did some other things, and now wants to be a part of my farm, but can't be full time. So that works out really well for me to have some part-time help and not have to fund a whole other person full time, but still have that be really good help.
And how many acres do you have under production?
I have 2.5 acres, but I'm only using about half of that each calendar year. So I'm doing cover cropping on half of it and then production on, so it's about 1.25 acres.
That's still 4 people over that 1.25 acres. That's, I'd say, a low labor density compared to some of the numbers you hear. What is your crop plan that you're doing to make this work based on some of the stuff you said about not having to have the most profitable crops? You're also able, you said, to cut some afternoons short. What's enabling you to do this and yet fund the farm, fund lifestyle?
I think a couple of big key things. One is flowers. About 1/3 of our sales are flowers. And those are a high profitability crop, no question. Just to throw out one example, and this is probably the tip top of the flower profitability example, but I planted 1.5 beds of ranunculus for this past spring, and that 1.5 beds earned us a little over $5,000. Just having there's a few of those crops on your farm. And I think it speaks to the kind of mixed feeling I have of what we started out talking about, because you do need high profitability crops. And if you can have even just a few that you can do in a pretty big way, you're well on your way to hitting a high enough revenue number for the year that you can do a lot with the rest of your time and your space. So flowers is one absolute key thing. I would say the other is a pretty long season. I have a farm stand on the farm that is open. Some years it's open year round, but I think I'm moving towards most years closing it for at least, say, 6 weeks to 2 months every winter, just to take a break and give the rest of the people a break. But that long season in a small population market, probably a good portion of my customers are buying a substantial amount from me 40 weeks of the year or something. And so we don't have to go so intense, so hard at any one time of the year, as we are spreading all that out.
Yeah, I think one key on the profitability thing is, and I think you hit it, the ranunculus is a good example, because now everybody's going to be like, oh, just go plant that. I talked to a microgreen grower who was making a bunch of money just selling flower petals. And it's, yes, certain things are profitable, very profitable, but they're not very profitable in every location. And that's that whole key, right? Like in
Yeah, I think so.
food or anything you do. It's
Mhm.
finding those profitable crops for your location. And there's probably, if you Venn diagrammed it, there probably is a lot of overlap in there of what those are, but that doesn't mean that is the default. So what are the other crops in the mix there that make up the bulk of your sales? Like what's at the low end, like stuff that you'd say is people would just say, no way, you're never going to be able to grow that on a market farm?
I really like to grow cantaloupe. I do a lot of my farming with the tractor, and so I can prep 600-foot beds for a little cantaloupe patch. It's just not super profitable per bed foot, but it's something that really draws people, especially like about this time of year. We have this dip in enthusiasm, I feel like. It's hot and people are sick of being out at the farmer's market. But if I can hand them a cantaloupe, then they'll come, they'll keep coming. But yeah, I don't think per labor hour or per bed foot that it's very profitable. Maybe like bulb onions would be considered not super profitable. It's a lot of work, a lot of weed control for a not very sexy crop. I'm suddenly blanking on all the things I feel like I grow that I'm not supposed to, but
Are greens a big part, or tomatoes a big part, cucumber?
yeah, tomatoes are a big part for sure. I grow a lot of a variety of tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, grape tomatoes, and then slicers and some heirlooms. Not a ton of heirlooms, but some. I grow greens. My salad mix, I feel, is one of my weakest, where I need to improve the most. I just haven't dialed it in basically, and I know that a lot of people rely on that as their like core crop. We get a lot of rain here, and so if it's not in a tunnel, the lettuce can get pretty beat up pretty badly. So I just need to improve on that. But yeah, and then we do some other greens like collards and kale, some mustard greens, but none of those are, I wouldn't say any of those are a huge part.
So if you have a steady customer base that's buying from your farm stand about 40 weeks a year, you said, are they generally buying variety every week? If you have that regular customer that comes up, are they closer to buying 10 things each to 4 things each?
I think it's pretty common that a produce customer, so there's people that come in and just get a flower bouquet, and that's maybe half of my flower sales. And then nearly everyone else, I would say, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of everyone else is at least buying 5 or more items from what I've seen.
So it's important to have variety?
I really think so. Yeah. I think I have enough dedicated customers who will come buy some of just about everything I have. That's how I'm able to make it work in a small city. I'll have, like on this past farmer's market, Saturday was a fluky, slow day. And I mentioned that it was a slow day to a couple of customers, and they just grabbed one of everything And we're like, oh, we can use this and this. And it was like 2 customers each spent $70.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, that makes a big difference if you can get a few of those people and have enough to offer them.
What's a small city? You've mentioned that.
Oh yeah, Muskogee is a little under 40,000 people.
Okay. And on a farmer's market, you have any idea the traffic flow through there in a day?
Yeah, something between 600 and 700 on average on Saturdays.
And what's a good day at the market?
For me, we've hit close to $3,000 this year. One great thing is we've held our high pretty steady for really since the 1st of May. We've been over 2,000, up around 2,500 a lot of those times. And then we'll have days that drop below 2,000. That it holds pretty steady.
So if you look back at the past 13 years, has it been a lot of, you're obviously probably accumulating customer base, building reputation in the town. And then has it been trial and error through those 13 years of getting the crops that work best for the land management, customer base wants them, the economics work? Or
Absolutely.
is this, or is what you, okay, so you've really evolved that over time.
Yeah, I think I know after 13 years that I'm not great at, like, when I listen to some of your podcasts, Diego, it seems to me like you're maybe more of a big picture person. Would that be, I don't know if that'd be fair.
That's I think
In a great way. But I think that I'm not. But I think I'm really good at tweaking 10% this way, 10% that way, and keeping track of what works and what doesn't. And I think that's helped us inch forward every year. I say inch forward. Some years it's more than inches, but I do think it's been a lot of trial and error, eliminating some crops that nobody cared about, bringing them back. Like this year, we tried kohlrabi like 5 years ago or something. And I tried it again this year. And Doug, who's the new kind of part-time partner on the farm, he loves it. And he said, nah, just try it again. And sure enough, my stepdad started peeling kohlrabi and handing out samples at market. And now we suddenly sold out of kohlrabi like in 2 weeks. And so just like weird little tweaks like that, trying to make things work that didn't work before, but being quick to say, I hate this. I hate digging potatoes. They suck and nobody cares. I'm not planting that again. So a lot of tweaks like that each year. Also tweaks on the marketing. We ran after a lot of different marketing opportunities for a lot of years. And then once I was doing the farm on my own or managing it on my own, and I didn't have time for that, it was amazing how focusing on just these 2 markets, both of them really swelled. Like when I stopped trying to do a CSA and have some online ordering and, oh, there's a wholesale, someone interested in wholesale in Tulsa, this drives them up there. Over the years, we tried a bunch of different things and I think have really found more success in focusing on a couple.
How much of your market growth was organic, meaning you drove that growth versus, I don't know, maybe the town got bigger?
I would say 100%. The town has not gotten bigger.
Okay. So what have you done? What have been the keys then?
I would say slow growth and more consistency every year with having crops available to sell. A big thing the last 5 years was, I was selling out of things in the farm stand constantly coming up to 2018, 2019. And so I think a lot of people who stopped to buy something, they were finding only a small selection and maybe not coming back for a while because it's just meh. But now we keep at least 3/4 of the crops we have available. We're able to keep them stocked throughout the week. And that has made a huge difference in return sales in the farm stand. So consistency has been huge. Consistency in the farm stand, consistently bringing a wide selection to the farmer's market, having it be the highest quality that people can get there. That's for flowers and for produce, just focusing on that. And a person who comes and buys typically comes back, I feel like. And then just probably some word of mouth, some social media. I would say my social media game is moderate, maybe a little weak actually, but it's consistent. I'm posting when we have stuff in the farm stand, people know it and they come get it.
When you say you bring a wide variety of stuff to market, like how many different items are you bringing? Are we talking like 12? Are you talking like 24? Because I've seen kind of everything in between.
Yeah, I think probably closer to 24.
Okay.
Yeah, I brought up my little summary that I keep. Total number of species, or not, I don't know if species is right, but different crops is 40 to 50 every year. And about 40 of those are what I consider my base crops that I always grow. And then maybe 10-ish are things I'm just trying, and they might go away the next year. I might try them again later. And then that's in that kind of base 40, it's about 25 are produce crops, excuse me, that might end up being couple different products. So they might be head lettuce and mixed lettuce. And then the rest would be flower species. So something like 15 flower species.
Gotcha. Yeah. Cause I mean, I feel like at least with ours, I try to shoot for 12 to 14. And I feel like it's such a wide diversity of stuff compared to some of the other folks. But yeah, but it always seems like no matter how diverse of a crop selection I bring, there's always people that are like asking for the one thing that I did. Oh, like you don't have green beans. You know how much work it is to pick green beans every other day for however many months throughout the summer? And yeah, I'm always interested to know what is a realistic threshold of how many different things you can grow at a time? Because even those 12, I feel like it's starting to settle in toward, okay, I can do this kind of on a rhythm and keep these things going. Yeah. And a mix of some stuff is a little bit of a value add, whether you're like making mixes of things or what. But yeah, the idea of 24 different items makes my head spin, just trying to envision like keeping up with those many different things and inventories for like market every single week. It feels like a lot, but I imagine the customers really appreciate that variety.
Yeah. And one of the things I've tweaked is I might have that much variety at some moments of the year, like May and June is probably maximum variety. And then I don't keep pushing all the spring crops into the summer.
Yeah.
They don't want to be there, but it's just going to be twice as much work to produce them. So I let some of that drop. And so like right now, I feel like we're off the other side of the peak of diversity and keeping track of a bunch of different stuff. Like on harvest day, it feels pretty relaxed now because it's whittled down to just the summer kind of staples. So it's not that diverse all year round for sure.
Yeah. Would you say like spring and fall when growing conditions are a little bit more like weather's a little bit more temperate and it's a lot easier to throw like a ton of different greens and a ton of different roots at the market?
Yeah, probably not fall so much for me, but spring for sure. Spring and late spring into summer, I try to get my first cucumbers and some of my summer flowers in pretty early in the spring. So we end up with everything that grows in the spring and some of the stuff that grows in the summer all at the same time for a couple months.
Yeah. And how long have you been, you mentioned you do 2 different markets. How long have you been at either of those markets?
So my 2 markets are just the one farmer's market I do and my farm stands.
Oh, gotcha. So how long have you been at your farmer's market?
We did that. That was our first thing we did was in 2013. We started growing there or growing and selling.
So you've been at the same market this entire time?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. And it has grown. That market has become more popular for sure. I shouldn't say for sure. Maybe it's waxed and waned over the years, but it's a really solid market. It's probably more bustling than you would expect for the size of our town. But I do think the last 4 or 5 years, there's more and more people each year. So it's doing better. And I think I'm more consistently bringing my customers to it as well.
Yeah. Because that was going to be my next question was like, how many of the people that are shopping the market do you feel are quote unquote your customers versus just general shoppers, general visitors to the market? Or is it more people that are like, I'm here for your stuff?
Yeah. I think this is maybe a pretty wild guess, but I'd say half and half.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you the
that may have been
main vegetable grower at that market?
I probably am selling the most but not by a huge margin. There are 2 others that sell a substantial amount, but probably not quite as much as me. I am the only organic grower at the market that has produce.
Do you have a lot of crop overlap with them?
Not a lot. It feels like the way that we present our crops is different. Even the crops we have that are overlapped, there's just a difference in presentation. So I think my stand stands out amongst the others. Do you think so?
How important do you feel that your organic certification is if you had to go back and redo it all over again? 2 years in, like you said, when you got certified, do you feel like it's been worth it, or is it just a little addition on it? It's one less step, something that you have to convey to your customer.
I think it's more like the second thing you said. I think, like I said, with our display looking different, and we regularly say we're from this town, we live in this town, we're growing everything ourselves. I think that is probably as important to most people as the organic certification. But I keep certifying every year and doling out that 450 or whatever it is, because I do think being able to say organic is a catch for enough customers that it probably pays off for me. I think might be close to a wash, but it still feels mostly worth it.
Yeah, I found it really surprising how many people are surprised when they find out that everything at our market booth comes from the farm.
Mm-hmm.
That was definitely not something I would have imagined that most people would have just taken that for granted or assumed that. But yeah, they're really blown away that everything that we have comes off the farm.
Yeah, that's good. If you can keep pushing that, I think it's something that has made a lot of our customers committed, is they know they're not being lied to. There's no BS. It's just, we grow it. If we can't grow it, we don't have it. Sorry. Not to say that you shouldn't ever take an opportunity to do some reselling if you've got a great source or whatever, but for sure, as long as you're growing only what you sell, I think it's a great thing to push.
So now, like, we'll take your cantaloupes, for example, because even though I don't have any growing, I know the other farm that I work at, I think we just delivered like close to 600 pounds to our big wholesale customer. And so that's obviously not like a long-term, it's not like something like tomatoes where you can harvest it for weeks and weeks and weeks. You have a short window. So like, how much of these summer crops that you're growing are like those consistent things that you're bringing at every week market for several months, or how many of them are more, or how many of the things that you're harvesting are like, we have a window where it's going to come on hard and come on fast, and then we're on to the next thing.
Yeah, I'd say summer crops, the ones that are basically all season: tomatoes, peppers, okra, eggplants.
Yeah.
And on the flowers, I have maybe another handful: zinnias, lisianthus, some accents, granary crops. That might be about it in terms of things that you plant once and they go all year. Yeah, and then we have cucumbers and squash that I have to keep planting. I don't know if that's your experience, but
Oh yeah, for sure.
and right now I'm in a gap where I messed up. I was a little bit feeling lazy about the time that it would have been time to plant this month's squash and cukes, and so I don't have them for another week or two. But those, I make them go all season by replanting them. Same with like sunflowers. You could do the same with cantaloupe, but I usually only plant 1 or 2 plantings of cantaloupe because that narrow harvest window is pretty rough on the back. And it's fun to do it for a while, and then people get excited, and then feels like about the time when you're selling to the same people.
Yeah.
They don't need you to have everything all the time. They get sick of it too. So there's a gap there. It works out okay. I get a break and you get a break.
Yeah. Because I'm in a similar boat where we inherit on this property that we're leasing. We inherited a small orchard of Asian pear trees and figs. And so here in the next couple of weeks to a month or so, I'm about to I think I'm projecting, based upon what it looks like last year and this year, somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 to 600 pounds of pears. And they'll last in the cooler for 3 months, but I don't have a cooler that can hold 600 pounds of pears that I can just dole out retail, just over the next through the rest of the year. And so, yeah, I'd love to get any sort of like advice that you have on those crops that like fruit really heavy, especially with fruit, because they do tend to be extremely seasonal and a really nice treat. Like any advice that you have on those things that fruit really hard and fast, and then they're gone before you know it. Like, how are you stretching out your sales through like storing them in the cooler, or are you just trying to push them wholesale and retail? Like, what are you doing with those sort of things?
Yeah, I do have some wholesale outlets that I can go to. Really, it would probably only be tomatoes that I'm able to grow. Not able to, but it's easy enough that I keep doing it, growing more than I can sell in my local market. So yeah, hitting up those couple of wholesale outlets. What is your cooler situation now?
I have 4 refrigerators right
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what we would do. We would store it in the cooler and dole it out. That's what we do with onions and garlic. The cantaloupe, I never have had more than I could sell at one time. I just rein in don't bite off more than I can chew with how much I plant.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe you could, I don't know, do you think there's other vendors at your farmer's market that don't mind pin hooking and would buy some from you and take them to their other markets or something like that?
I have a couple that they might be interested. I don't know how volume that they would do and if it would be worthwhile. Now, thankfully, just another reason, I may have talked about this already on a previous episode. One of the jobs that I have at the other farm that I work at is I run the deliveries twice a week. And so I've been able to build a relationship with 2 of our wholesale. That farm is primarily a wholesale farm. And so I've been able to build a really good rapport with especially with the people who are handling purchasing. And so like I've already talked to them months ago and just letting them know, hey, we're getting close. And oh yeah, we definitely want pairs. We definitely want figs. So selling them will not be difficult. Like if I wanted to, I think I wasn't on the property at this point last year, but I think the landlord sold to one of those vendors. I think it was like 800 pounds got sold to one account.
Mhm.
And obviously that's wholesale, which I mean, 800 pounds at whatever, I think it was like somewhere in the neighborhood of $253 a pound. That's nothing to shake a stick at. That's a pretty good amount of money coming in. It's like, but if I could take half of that and do a retail, whether it's through online order or pickup on the farm or get people excited and they're buying like, I wouldn't say as much as like half bushel, but buying like substantial amounts instead of just 1 or 2 pairs at a time. It could really be a big game changer for the farm come August, September.
Absolutely. I would say I wouldn't underestimate the potential of that. You said you estimate maybe 600 or 800 pounds.
Yeah, I'd say between 5 and 6. We had to cut a lot out, some disease, but those trees were absolutely loaded. So
Yeah.
I imagine we'll probably have a pretty good harvest.
Yeah, that's great. You may find that you don't actually need to do anything special. Offer some, like you say, some half bushel prices to your existing customers and take them to market for a few weeks, and that might be all you need.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, the way fruit sells, I feel like if I had 600 pounds of pears, they'd be gone in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Just because people are so wild for local fruit and there's just never enough available.
Yeah, you mentioned that kind of your market is somewhere in the neighborhood of 600-700 like on a Saturday. If you're
Traffic,
making
yeah.
and your sales based off of that, that sounds like that the majority of people are spending a good bit, like they're buying quite a bit from you.
Mhm.
Do you think that's because you've just established yourself over more than a decade of being there and people know that you're there, they expect to come and buy from you because you deliver year after year, week after week? Or is it like, what do you think the reason is that you're able to convert that number of customers or potential customers into that number of sales every week?
I think it is exactly what you said. It's just consistency, consistent appearance. We're never not there in the season that we're there, which is 1st of April through. We always tell people we'll at least be here through the end of August. And then we sometimes quit our market season before it ends, mid-September or something. But so I think it's consistency. And then our big bouquets are $20. We do at least have some big items that doesn't take that many to get a few $100. So that's been a huge game changer for the farm is doing the flowers for sure. Because it turns those 600 people, if 30 of them want a bouquet, then that's a huge amount of money.
Do you have any other flower farmers at your market or is it just you?
No, there's several others actually. Yeah, they're all $10 or less, their bouquets. And they have a style. Each of them has their own style. And I would say they look more similar to each other than to mine. I learned to grow produce the hard way, screwing it up for 3 years and then figuring a little bit out. I didn't have nearly the brains that you had to go work at a farm for a couple of years. So kudos to you for that. But the flowers, a good friend of mine who had grown flowers for market, who had gone to a farm in Northwest Arkansas that grows produce and flowers. He'd gone there for an internship, learned from him, came back, grew flowers here for, I think it was close to 10 years. And then she was done. She literally handed me her calendars for my
Oh, wow.
first seed. And then she came and showed me things, how to do little things. And she's my closest friend now. So that helps too. So I actually knew how to grow really good flowers from the jump. Whereas I think with the produce, it's probably a little rough at first, but I had a head start. And so I think the quality of my flowers and the different species I can grow that are fancier, I've been able to do that because I was able to start a little bit ahead. So I think that my flowers look like something different. And so I think there are customers who would only buy my flowers.
Do you, how successful, like, however you quantify and define success, like how successful do you think your farm would have been, and what would be if you took out the flower component of your farm?
Yeah, it would be a different farm. I think we would probably need to go to a Tulsa farmers market or do some kind of substantial CSA. And I don't know, it's hard to say though, because I've been managing all these different crops. Maybe I would just be the best produce grower in the county or something. And now I still make a lot of mistakes because I'm managing so much diversity. It's hard to say. I do think it would be a different farm. And I think we would need more outlets for our produce if it was different.
Yeah, because I definitely feel the gravitational pull of the flowers. And 6 months ago, I'd have been like, absolutely not. I don't want anything to do with flowers. You can't eat them. I know you can eat some, but if you can't eat them, it's just purely aesthetic. In my like rational, practical brain was just like, absolutely not. We're not going to do it. There's other people that I don't know the first thing about flowers. Planted like a bed of zinnias, and we didn't get any rain. I didn't have any irrigation on it, and they're just toast. But then back in the beginning of June, we had where our farmers market is in the town of Monroe. We closed the farmers market for one weekend because there was the Monroe Blooms Festival, it's a large flower festival that the city puts on. And so the farmers market kind of joined with the overall festival, and we continued our normal thing, just surrounded by all this other stuff. But I realized I can't show up to a flower festival with just vegetables. And so I kind of scramble. And thankfully, the other farm I bought some Snapdragon and some zinnias. Obviously, I had to pay for those. So it wasn't just pure profit, but I was able to sell like, I don't know, 10 little simple, like single flower bouquets. But I was like scrambling. What am I going to do? I need flowers for the flower festival. Why I hadn't thought about that ahead of time, beyond me. Thankfully, I had a large, almost hedgerow, really. It's just a long set of flower beds full of like perennial, like medicinal herbs and like pollinator species, a lot of like anise hyssop, yarrow, bee balm, things like that I had transplanted from my former property. And so I just started like just cutting whatever I could, that any sort of color or dimension to it, and just making these kind of, I've described rustic bouquets, but they really look like something that your kids would go and grab weeds and bring them inside and show them to you.
Sure.
And I just made them, and I've done a whole marketing push of it's dual purpose. It's a beautiful little bouquet that sits on the table. And then when it's done, you can hang it upside down, let it dry. You have this wonderful medicinal tea you can make out of it. And yeah, and honestly, over the last couple of weeks, as things have been slim, like it's been my saving grace, where everything else is like $4 a pound, $6 a pound, $6 or $16 a pound with like salad mix. And then all of a sudden I have these bouquets that are $15 a piece. And like consistently every week I'm selling like 4, 5, 6 of them. And so I feel the draw toward the flowers that I never wanted to go to before. And yeah, so you might be unintentionally convincing me to go the flower farm route a little bit there.
Yeah. You don't have to do it right away. You could try to perfect your produce craft for a bit and see how that goes. But yeah, people want them, and they want them for their own reasons, and if they want them, I'll give them to them. But
I've been
you're
talking to some growers just on that.
Sure.
How much they move flowers for. $20 a bouquet, not crazy. $25 bouquets. Mother's Day, maybe even more. And yeah, that's where it starts adding up. $20, 5 sales, you're at 100 versus a $5 bunch of radishes. It's the exact opposite. You got to do 20 bunches,
Yeah.
get up there. Big difference. But yeah, like anything, you got to be able to sell them. You have to be able to manage them. What's
Yeah.
management like on the farm, flower wise, doing that with veg? And
Mhm.
I guess you really just got the fourth person. So it was just the three of you for a couple of years.
I was always hiring harvest help on Fridays since I've been doing it on my own. So this is my fifth season on my own. So each of those 4 seasons I had either like a high schooler, or one year it was a mom and her 2 teenagers, always had Friday help. But yeah, I pick most of the flowers, but whoever's helping me will pick a few of the species that you teach. This is how you do this. And then they go do that harvesting. So the flowers all come in to the cooler. On Fridays, they go into, I have a mobile cooler on a trailer. So I'm harvesting the flowers. Usually each trip out to the field, I'm maybe getting 8 buckets of flowers and 4 crates of something vegetable, usually in order of how they need to come out of the field. First things for produce is salad mix and basil or whatever for this time of year. And then the flowers that need to be harvested earliest. So we're bringing both things back at once. The vegetables go into the walk-in, into a specific corner that my parents know this is the stuff we're going to wash. And then the flowers go straight into the trailer. And they have a little shelf in the front 2 shelves just for flower buckets. They go right in that trailer and I don't see them again until farmer's market the next morning. And then, yeah, all the vegetables end up in the cooler. They get washed. And as they get washed and packed, if it's not going to the farm stand, they also go to the trailer. And my folks have their organizational system for how they want to pull things out on market morning and have it accessible in the trailer, because they're also doing the setup and display of produce for the most part. Because I get there first and I pull all the flowers out and I start making bouquets right there at market. And that's what I do most of the time, which is something I'd like to change. I don't like being stuck at the back. Customers want to talk to me and I'm like, no, I'm making the bouquet. But so far, that's how we've been able to keep up with demand. Because some Saturdays most Saturdays I make 60 bouquets between big ones and small ones. And there are like holidays that it'll be maybe 80. And it's mostly just me making them. I have some friends I can call on a busy day to come help make bouquets at market, but that's how we manage it so far. And I think that needs to change. I think we need a little more capacity there, but it's worked pretty well.
What's been the key to maximizing your appearance of your booth at the farmer's market? 13 years of tinkering. You've made it clear, hey, like our presentation's different than others. You've grown sales at the market. You've probably tried a bunch of stuff. Where are you at now with, hey, these things really work where I'm at?
The biggest thing is that, so my mom is really visually gifted. So she's very crafty. She's made like our kind of market tablecloth. It has like our logo. I don't even know how she did it now that I'm thinking about it. How you sew our logo. I don't know, with lettering, and it's classy, but also looks homegrown-y. So she's got a lot of that stuff down. And then we have places on the tables where we just know things work well. Our tomatoes, we just pile them on the main table with the scale. And that is different. All the other growers sell them in boxes, in quart boxes or little trays. We just like that better. It's easier to set up and our customers prefer it, seemingly. And then we've found that a lot of things go well in a quart till or a little quart, like a wooden box. So it's not like a paper pulp box that falls apart and fades. It's like wooden, thin little wood. And that's how we sell a good chunk of our stuff, squash and peppers and eggplant and things like that. So we don't have to have everything weighed out. We really only have a couple of crops that get weighed on the scale, so that most things just get dumped in a bag and it's a quick transaction, as opposed to everything having to be calculated really in this kind of complicated way.
So you're selling units.
Yeah, units for most things. And we play with, the last few years, we've been trying to improve our prices, because I do think our prices are, a lot of them are too low on a national standard, but then too low for us to like either increase the price or quit growing them. We've been able to do that by changing the unit size so that it doesn't seem like we're asking too much, but you still get a good amount. Like going from a quart box of okra to a pint box of okra and only lowering the price a little bit. And I don't feel like we're doing it in like a dishonest way. Like we check the weight and make sure that it's just a slight price increase per pound, but in a way to keep the display still looking good. I think it's really important. We were just talking about this the other day, to whatever thing you have, if it's a box or a pint, paper pint, or a basket of bulk things, it needs to be full, or people think that you've made a mistake and they're not going to buy it. And that's been so true in the farm stand. If I try to prepare something by weight, like a pound and a half of potatoes or something, if the box doesn't look full, people will just pull it from the other box and say, oh, there, now I got my full box, and they'll pay for it. And they're not trying to be dishonest. It's just, it looks that way. People.
Is full mean over the top, little bit of a pile up?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. A little. It doesn't have to be a lot. Yeah.
And when you say like prices may be too low, what are we talking here? Because for instance, there's another grower in our market who's selling cucumbers for 75 cents a pound. I'm selling them for $4 a pound, and I consistently sell out. He doesn't. So where are you now? Granted, I'm bringing like 5-6 pounds of cucumbers a week right now, but like where do your prices fall per pound on different things?
Yeah. I think compared to what you guys have been talking about, I think I'm not just necessarily needing to compare to what your prices there in Georgia are, but just from what I do in my own calculations, I have a spreadsheet that I try to go through every winter and kind of see where I'm falling on profitability. But just as an example, I think you said your salad mix, you were doing $6.50 for a half pound. Is that right?
I was doing 6. So I went with lowering the amount versus changing the price. So I'm doing a 6-ounce bag for $6.
Okay. So we're doing
$16 a pound.
Yeah.
Or less.
7 to 8 ounces for $5. Yeah. But like I said, and that's a price increase. But no one else is doing salad mix at our markets. Like I said, that's one of those crops I didn't get on down that because I know that's the low hanging fruit. But so I'm often picking, there are times when it's like, I know it's super high quality, small leaves, super tender arugula. And then other times when I'm picking bigger heads and just chopping it up. And the kind of pristine or highest in quality isn't there. So I feel okay about that, but I want to try to improve that. But, and then like tomatoes, we're at $3 a pound for slicers, for heirlooms, a little more than that for cherries and grape tomatoes. And we sell those in pints for $4, which is a little under a pound. I think your carrots were more than mine. And I know carrots and beets are both something I need to be coming up on just because of coming up in price because of the amount of work. And so my stepdad washes all the roots and he constantly accuses me of not knowing what it takes because I don't know the last time I washed. No, I have washed roots recently because sometimes he's not there, but he constantly accuses me of not knowing how much work it is, lovingly, of course. But so I know we need to go up on that. And so I've been charging $4 a bunch and it's more than half pound. And I think you said you were at a half pound for 5 or 6 or something, right?
Yeah, I do about a half pound bunch. I don't know. Sometimes it varies from week to week, but yeah, somewhere around a half pound bunch, but I do $4. So initially I tried to shoot for this like magical, everything that's bunched is $4 and everything that's bagged is $6. And I thought it'd be like a perfect magical thing. Then I realized like not everything falls into either of those categories. And now everything ranges from $2 to $15 and anywhere in between. But yeah, roots are the one thing that I feel like I'm not losing money, but I'm potentially like sacrificing profit because I can't go much smaller than a half pound bunch. Like it just feels dinky. It feels, yeah, especially when you start getting into like your larger beets or larger carrots, like it's 2 beets. Like who wants to pay $4 for 2 beets, even though it weighs the same as a bunch of 10 tiny beets? It just doesn't quite feel right. And it varies between a half pound and 3/4, but that's the bunched root vegetables are definitely the one thing that I feel like I have the most opportunity to increase the amount of profit that we're making. But yeah, and that's another extremely beneficial thing that I've gained from being on another farm is like knowing what to charge for things, because like I by far the most expensive farm at the farmer's market. Like 75 cents a pound for cucumbers or $2 a pound for green beans and things that, yeah, you're like, I'm literally posted up next to a farmer. We both have zucchini, we both have yellow squash, we both have cucumbers, and I'm consistently like double the price of his. And so it makes you feel a little uncomfortable at first, but then you realize but people are buying all of mine. And so it's okay. So whether or not, and I feel like some of that has come down to, I tend to pick the smaller ones. And I've been really surprised at how many people want small cucumbers, small zucchini, small yellow squash. And so obviously like per pick, I guess you can quantify that way. We might be making about the same, but when it comes down to it, like per weight, I'm definitely doing more. And yeah, the price is one of those things where no one tells you what you're supposed to charge. They just expect you to figure it out and and you have to just start spitballing and I felt it's like push the boundary of where you think people want to spend. And then when they don't buck back, then you're like, okay. And I guess we've like, this price makes me uncomfortable, but it doesn't make the customer uncomfortable. And that seems to be the perfect place to be.
Yeah. Right. No, that seems wise to start there. And I do, like I said, I have this spreadsheet that I do have some numbers behind my prices, but it's more like a ranking. Like I know where my crops fall, and tomatoes are up here. And so I'm fine where I'm at on price on tomatoes because I feel like we're more profitable on them than most of the produce. And then the things filter down, and I just am trying to like move those lower ones up a little bit each season. But what do you think about your efficiency as a grower? And do you feel like are you already seeing some places where you're going to be able to grow next year? You feel like you've learned enough that you could grow twice as many carrots with the same amount of work. Have you had any thoughts like that?
Yeah, for sure. I think because I try to send an update regularly, Diego, of kind of what things are going on. Like the two things that I mentioned were like weeding and succession planting. So the two things that have probably been like my biggest stumbling blocks this year has just been like my successions have just been way off. Like I get really excited because the arugula looks great. And I'm like, oh, I get to harvest it next week. And then I don't have arugula for the next week because I think starting in the spring, I was able to get an unrealistic expectation, especially like salad mix or arugula, where it's, man, I got my first planting of salad mix, first two plantings, I got 3 cuts off of that salad mix or off of those lettuce beds. And now I'm lucky to get 1 cut if it doesn't bolt before I can even harvest it. It's just understanding the timing and succession of like, all right, like I need to be planting lettuce every single week because the likelihood of me getting 2 cuts off of lettuce this time of year, and obviously some of that has to do with varieties, trying different things and trying to read and talk to other farmers. But the succession thing will definitely, hopefully help next year. But yeah, just staying on top of cultivating because I can't quantify it, but it feels like a weedier bed tends to not do as well. Whether it's like a disease issue or it's just the weeds that crowd out and shade out, whether it's like in the root zone or just in the kind of canopy, but feels like stuff that's trying to fight against weeds doesn't do well. And so I think if I can stay on top of those two things, which I'm not doing a very good job of staying on top of either of them at the moment, if I can stay on top of those two things, I think it'll be a big game changer for us, even coming into the fall, but definitely next year.
Nice. You might think about, if you're not already doing this, just having a planting calendar, even if it's not very good, at least you could have something to look back to. What was I trying to do? And I was trying to plant arugula on this date and this date, and I didn't have enough at this date, so I need to add a planting or whatever. And I make a planting calendar for the greenhouse and for the fields in each winter. And it's like my boss in the spring. And I found that to be really, really helpful. Takes a lot off on your brain, I think.
Yeah. Are you just doing that like pen and paper?
Just Excel. And then I just
Excel.
kind of copy it over from the year before and then make some tweaks based on what was too much, too little, too late, too early, whatever.
Yeah, because I keep like a seeding and plant and transplanting diary of what got seeded in the seed house this week, what got direct seeded out, what got transplanted in amounts and all that stuff to be able to look back on. But yeah, but like right now, every Like every month is a new adventure because like what worked in June doesn't work in July, and the succession of something in June doesn't work in July or whatever. And yeah, it's trying to just remember and chronicle as much of what I've done this year and trying try to pivot for next year or even coming into fall. Cause I'm really excited about fall because I know it'll be a little bit more consistent as far as we'll have relatively consistent rain once we get mostly through September, but just cooler temperatures, things will grow a little bit more, at least for the meat of it. From my experience over the last few years on the other farm, like things, they just like steady out, like germination tends to get better. Things can sit out in the field a little bit longer before they go to seed. And yeah, I'm trying to just capture as much information as possible in hope that maybe I have enough of it on paper and in my mind to do something like a seeding calendar next year. But I imagine every year that I do it, it'll make it easier and easier to, like I said, have that boss.
You'll have more than you had this year, for sure. No doubt about that.
Yeah.
Be way ahead.
How many years?
Now, how do you? Oh, go ahead.
How many years in, Cassie, do you think it was before you got a handle on succession planning?
I think I started really having that calendar maybe just 3 years in, maybe 4, maybe about the time I went full time, and definitely been tweaking it ever since, mainly because of the number of crops, and each one can be tweaked a little bit here or there. And I think there's still a lot of, it's easy to pay attention to the wrong feedback sometimes, like something failed, not because I planted it too early or whatever, but because it got rain at the wrong time or something. It's tweaked every year, but sometimes probably in the wrong direction. But at least I have somewhere to go back to say, I did this and this, and I was planning to do this, and next year I'm going to plan to do this. And it's fairly quick process to make those changes each year.
Was that 3 or 4 years in where you felt confident that there was less guessing and more just knowing you were going to have what you needed when you needed it, assuming no weird weather, disease issues?
I think, no, not probably that kind of confident bit longer, I would say, because of the weather in the spring here. It's just so year to year. Like this year we had a really dry, like late March and April, and a super wet May. Sometimes it's the reverse. So having a planting calendar, like a field prep calendar, like how many beds do I need for this week, is really, like I said, it's my boss, but it's only a suggestion because there might not be the conditions to be in the field with the tractor or whatever. I think that confidence took a little bit longer, maybe more like 7 years. And it was only needing to realize that there is this huge variability. It's not my fault. There's this variability. And it's more having the experience to find the end. Okay, I'm going to be able to plant in this window in the forecast. And that's probably taken a lot of years.
When it comes to, we'll take this time of year just because it's obviously top of mind. Like, how do you juggle the sort of the longer season things? Maybe it's 1 or 2 successions, like Caleb, versus the things that are like, and I guess this could apply in any time of year that you're growing, but like, how do you juggle the things that maybe are longer season versus the really quick turnover? Like, for instance, broccolini or something that I grow where I'll plant it and it's going to take 50, 75 days to really start producing, but it's going to hang with me for a while, versus something like Hackeri turnips or arugula that are like in and out faster than you can snap your finger. Like, how is it just you're slave to your calendar and you just know, I just have to make sure that I stay on top of this planting every single week, while these ones I know, like, all right, it's been 3 months and now it's time to get the next succession going.
Yeah, no, I think I'm definitely slave to the calendar from February to maybe into May or mid-May. And then through the summer, when there's a cool down and rain in the forecast, I just go back to my planting plan. What are the like 4 things that I'm trying to keep going all summer? And so I always look at the forecast anyway. Doug, my farm partner, He's an obsessive weather guy. So he knows it's like part of his job to tell me if something good's coming, whether it's getting cover crop seed in or a new seed for sunflower, squash, cukes, whatever. And then that's really all I do for most of the summer is just look for a window, plant what seems right. So it's a little more loosey-goosey for sure. But in the spring, I have that calendar and I just try not to miss anything. I check it almost every day to make sure I remember what's coming up. And that's, I think, what makes it possible to do be good diversity.
Yeah. Speaking of cover crops, how vital is that to your operation? Because if you took whatever you might be growing on for one particular year, that brings you very close, still larger, but very close to what like my potential growing space is. I think I have just under an acre of actual like cultivated land that I can put into production, minus the fruit stuff. And I've had that thought, do I just try to maximize a third to a half an acre and then just flip flop back and forth between sections? Or do I just try to squeeze in cover crops when and how I can? Like I'm really curious because that's a new frontier that I haven't really had time to get into yet. I'm just trying to crank out as much production as I can in what beds I've already made.
Yeah. I would say it depends on probably two things: the quality of your soil to start with. And if you're still doing the deep compost pretty consistently, I would say they might do the same thing, at least to start out with. I'm not saying that compost and cover crops are equivalent in all ways, but I think for me, the cover crops has the really regular cover cropping. Some years, a particular bed area will get 3 rounds of cover crops in it. And now I'm moving more towards doing short-term perennials to reduce that workload. But the improvement in the soil it's massive. It's night and day from where it started out. It's like a silty long, so it's clay, but it had the potential to lighten up a little bit. And that the cover crops absolutely have accomplished that. Our drainage is 10 times better internally. We don't have standing water on the top after rain anymore because it's going down into all those open spaces that the roots have opened up. And just how it feels. It used to be smeary and now it's kind of buttery, if that makes any sense. But I think
sure.
Our production has improved because of that. I've never had a great source of compost and never learned that system that I think it sounds like maybe you started with. And I think you might actually be achieving similar improvements if you're able to put a lot of compost on.
Like I said, I'm just not experienced enough to really know. I feel like I'm seeing changes. I'm seeing things continue to do well, a little bit more tilth in the soil. I don't feel like I have to broad fork between every bed flip now. Probably should. It's just good practice, but it's honestly, it's like this time of year. It's 3:00 in the afternoon and it's 95 degrees. I don't want to broad fork either right now. So this arugula is just going to go straight into whatever was in there before. But yeah, I got lucky with finding a decent source of compost. From between the 2 loads that I've gotten, there's been a little bit of variation. And so it puts the red flags up a little bit of, don't just bank on this being super legit every single time. You never know. But yeah, I think my biggest question when it comes to cover crop is, do you see that as more of like almost like a prophylactic, in the sense of it's just it's a good practice that we do, and everything cover cropped at least once a year, just because it's a good thing as a preventative measure and to help boost overall soil health? Or is it more of, this section was really bad this year and we need to give it some extra attention? Because I've experienced a bit of both, where it's like bigger open fields in the back might get cover cropped, they might get clover every year or whatever, but then in the tunnels or in more of the like high production area, it's like the only time cover crops go into those beds is when it's so bad that it's blatantly obvious that we don't need to plant anything of a cash crop in there, and it needs a break.
I would say I wouldn't expect a single cover cropping to correct much. And I might be wrong in that, but I think of it more like the first thing you said, like a maintenance issue, like a continual improvement. But I really don't think I need to, or that anyone has to do it quite as extensively as I've done it. And I think I've improved enough, the soil has improved enough that I could get away with dialing back on that, but I think I would always try to have kind of a cover crop in the rotation somewhere. I don't know. I don't know about the idea of giving the soil a break, if that's quite it, because it's still growing stuff, right? If you plant your
Yeah.
cash crop there, it's still got roots down. Maybe, I guess it is a break in terms of you're not hoeing it, you're not tramping all over it with your feet and watering it with your well water. Maybe you are in a tunnel. Yeah, I am in a tunnel, but yeah, I think it's more a continual improvement thing. If you can get it into part of your system in some way that works, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and it might be in a way that actually lowers your, if you can work in a cover crop in a way that keeps you from having to, I don't know, for me, it would be keep me from having to till up that weeds in that section because I got it as a cover crop in time, or from dragging a tarp over it because it's about to get weedy. So having it as part of the system works great. Using it as a response, I don't know if that's worth it, but I've not thought about it enough to speak to that in an educated way. But that's my sense.
Gotcha. Yeah, because as of right now, the one consistent sort of quasi cover cropping that happens is just about every bed that ends up in arugula. I let it when I'm done with it. And usually it's not a conscious decision. It's usually just I'll get to it when I get to it. Oh, look, that arugula has started going to seed or it's starting to go to flower and it's getting really tall and there's no way I can harvest it anymore. And it's like, all right, let's mow it down and let's tarp it. Like a bed under plastic right now and another one that was under plastic that's asking for something else. And I don't have anything for it yet. But would you be satisfied with that as like a cover crop of like, all right, maybe I got 2 or 3 cuts out of the arugula and then we mowed it down and we tarped it? Because it's not going to be as super thick and dense, but it's still a lot of roots in the ground. It's a lot of good amount of biomass that's breaking down on the soil. Or would you prefer to have a distinctive, here's my mix that I like for this, and I'm going to plant this, and then we're going to either crimp it or tarp it or whatever?
Yeah, I like the idea of recognizing that your crops add organic matter too to the soil. But I would say the one thing that would be missing is diversity of species. And I would recommend starting with a massive diversity or something, but 2 or 3, a mix of 2 or 3, I think accomplishes quite a bit more than just like a crop to cover crop idea or your bed of arugula that you maybe let it grow up a bit so there's more biomass there. But I think to start with, that there's nothing wrong with that as a strategy. And if you have
Yeah.
a crop that's not super weedy, instead of mowing it down just so it looks clean, let it grow a little bit if it's not too buggy or whatever, and then tarp it. I think that's a great place to start until you maybe get your rotations set. Maybe figure out, oh, maybe I can stick in some cowpeas and buckwheat here or whatever. Like I said, find places where it can actually fit more naturally, so you're not having to push it in. But
Now, how do you handle direct seeding into with your cover crop rotations? You just plan on the next thing in that rotation is going to be a transplant, or do you, I don't know if you till or are you just tilling it in and then you're direct seeding?
yeah, tilling. Yeah, because I
Gotcha.
do till. I use a chisel plow and a tiller to prep my beds. And if this has been a huge challenge. Like a couple of years ago, I realized every spring is this massive struggle because I am growing these enormous cover crops. Like I was all proud of my 12-foot tall sorghum Sudan grass, but it's still there in chunks 3 feet long in spring.
Yeah.
And I like major struggle even just a couple of years ago, realizing I can't keep doing this. So a flail mower has been really important. I bought one of those just last year. Finally getting them chopped up in small enough pieces that it'll break down.
And that's just on your tractor, correct?
On the tractor, yeah. I've got like a 35 horsepower tractor that
Gotcha.
can straddle a bed that's about 40 inches on the top. Everything is done on that size.
Gotcha.
All my implements are 6 feet wide, so a single pass with the tractor, whether it's with a disc or the rototiller, is clearing that tractor path. So yeah, most cover crops if I'm planting into this area in the spring, I will have just seeded over this past month. The last cover crop spot's going to get So it's going to grow up, maybe get mowed a couple times, maybe not. Winter kill in the fall if I didn't mow kill it already. And mostly it's going to be standing there throughout the fall. And that way it has plenty of time through the winter to break down. Really, I need some time in the fall for it to start to break down. I think that's been my mistake, is not giving it warm weather to break down in. And then I can, in the late winter, can start. I'll get a final mow on it, maybe disc it in, and then a couple passes if I need it. If it's not broken down, disc it in again, just keep everything real shallow. And then that final chisel plow and till before I plant. Yeah. And my understanding from soil microbiology is if you're cover cropping a lot and getting roots pretty far down in, if you can keep your surface cultivation shallow, the fungal, like the hyphae and stuff, you might be breaking up at the top, but you've got all this network down below that is revived. It comes back up as your crop is planted. So I think the tilling, I think I've come to terms with, I think I'm just going to continue to be a tillage farm. Even though
a shallow till.
Yes. Just trying to always keep it shallow and keep the mindset is keep things going deep and keep the tillage very shallow and as minimal as possible. There's some crops that I only chisel plow and then I shake the bed and plant into it that way without ever full turnover of the soil.
Yeah. I definitely think this year has been a challenge of like, how sacred is this whole no-till thing that you've committed yourself to? Part of it is just the reality of I have a tractor. It's unfortunately even like a 30-inch bed, the wheelbase is like 27.5. So it's a little too narrow to just straddle the bed. But I have a tiller, I have a chisel plow, I have a bush hog. And it's just been like, man, would this be worth it to just take the tiller down this bed and just like churn everything up in the top couple inches and just get a nice, flat, good, clean surface to plant into. And I think the dogma is starting to fly out the window and realize there's a time and a place for everything. And I don't know where we'll end up ultimately. Right now, no-till seems to work just from a practicality standpoint of not having a BCS and all that sort of stuff. But it's moving away from dogma into like conscious decision-making territory now.
Sure. Yeah, I wouldn't be afraid to hold on to it as long as you can. I've heard of farms that were probably pretty similar to my system converting to no-till and loving it. We're never going back because their air pressure goes down. And we are not on top of weeds this year. I thought the last few years, man, I got this weed thing figured out. A little tractor cultivation going on, or timing good with the hoeing and all that. And I had 3 good, clean years of minimal weeds. And this year, just everything went out the window. And so every time I hear someone on an interview saying how we went from tillage to no tillage, and I'm just amazed at how few weeds there are, I'm like, okay, I got to go no till. But that's like, you can't just do that, right? So I would say don't give it up until you really are confident. But I think it's a great place to be. And you and Diego, I think, through this whole process has unpacked a lot of where your ideas have come from, and that some of it's dogma, some of it's worth holding on to. And I think that's a good spot to be in.
Yeah. And I think I'm lucky in the sense that I've consumed so much stuff, reading books, watching things, listening to podcasts, that it's like, I know all of the right answers, quote unquote. And then now it's been a process of trying to apply those right answers to my context, seeing like, all right, that doesn't work here, or that does work here. And so it's, if anything, I think this journey is just like the overarching story would be like, this is where dogma goes to die, or at least gets tested to see what can make it through the refining process. And as of now, if I was doing no-till to prevent weed pressure, I wouldn't be doing no-till anymore. I can tell you that much. But that's also I feel like somewhat unique to my experience versus other places. But it's also like, it went from being heavy tillage to where the guy before me would till a strip, plant 1 row of something, never do any cultivation, let it grow up, and he's hunting through Johnson grass to pick tomatoes, and then would just bush hog it, till it in, plant the next thing. And so I have years and years of weeds to work with. I have no lack of good weed seed bank. And I don't know. We'll talk if we talk again next year. Maybe. Oh yeah, it's finally starting to reap some of the benefits of not turning over the soil every time I do a bed flip. But it's a constant test of, man, this would be a lot easier if I could just drive down this bed with a tractor and just churn everything up, get it nice and good, and then run the jank through there, or just like transplant and then be done. But I'm hoping that I'm putting in the investment now that'll pay dividends down the road.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say is your imagining of how clean it is after every time you till it is possibly too rosy. I'll have times when I till it and I look back and I'm like, I can't plant into that. It's too chunky. There's still too much residue. And then I don't have another tool. So I'm like trying to drag my paper pot planter through big old clumps of stuff, or I'm raking it off so that I can, like you said, direct seed or use the paper pot. So I still have a ton to learn about that even. And so it's not as straightforward. I think the guy that you're describing, I wonder if a more traditional approach has been 5-inch passes or something, because like, I don't know how people are getting to this pristine, clean, powdery soil, because I rarely see it. But it's probably because I'm doing so much cover cropping that there's just so much there.
Do you know at the other farm, because they like a pretty standard tillage operation, most every bed flip is a chisel and a till or two, depends. Just depends on if we're tilling in a bed of arugula or something. Yeah, it usually gets 2 passes. But I know obviously, but that other farm, we have 30 foot by 96 foot high tunnels. It's like several acres under plastic. And so with that, and we're using drip tape. So only putting water right where the crops are, that definitely helps eliminate some of that. But outside, it's just like open field or whatever. Yeah, everything's getting 2 chisel passes, 2 tills. And then you're like, let's hope that grass, enough of those roots got exposed and they'll die and we can transplant into that or seed into that. But I've also learned that like Instagram is not a good example of what my farm should be. And it's, nope, this will work. Let me just grab those couple of clumps of grass out of there that get caught in the hang, and then it'll be fine. And the rest of it will die, or I'll just hit it with the collinear hoe or the stirrup hoe, and then we'll be fine.
To start to wind this one down, Cassie, are there things you do at this point on the farm are there things you don't do at this point on the farm because you've tried it and it just doesn't work? And I'll say that under the context of this whole umbrella, this whole episode's under the umbrella of, hey, context matters. But in your case, what have you abandoned? Their practices, crops.
I'm abandoning potatoes after this year. That's one crop that's fresh on my mind. Let's say practices. I abandoned the CSA model. I don't think it was bad. I think it was the most work of the 3 market types that I was doing. Most work for the least total revenue. So I did abandon that. I'm sure there's many. Not thinking of any at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, if nothing stands out, that's all good. Yeah. And then just final advice for farmers that are in positions like Alex. They're in their first, let's say, 1 to 3 years. They're starting out. Some stuff's working, some stuff's not. What would you share with them after 13 years?
I would say just expect that in a few years, you're going to be faster at everything you do. And just think about the compounding effects of that. I think when someone comes on the farm to work for me, like I have a bunch of nieces and nephews, and they're all like strapping young people. And I'm like this 40-year-old lady, and I do everything twice as fast. And I'm not saying that to brag. It's just, that's what experience gets you. And you will get there too. And it cannot help but happen. No matter how good you are now, you'll be twice. I would say, I think I've already said, I'm reading my little notes here. I wrote some down just to make sure I had something to say, but I don't think it's intuitive how big of a difference tweaking makes from year to year. And I might say that as someone, like I said, who's not naturally a big picture thinker, but just shifting a little, planting a little more of the things that you didn't have enough of, or moving something in your planting calendar, or packaging something differently so that you get a little bit better price. Those tweaks really add up a lot, and you can really do a lot with that. So don't underestimate that. You'll get better at sales too. And that's just another type of tweak that improves what you can do. Like, it's just, there's a lot of little things that add up to more income with less work if you just keep consistent. And then the other thing is, you guys had an episode where you talked a lot about worrying about doing the same thing year after year. And I totally get that. And I probably am suffering from that a little bit, like a tiny bit of, I've had a little bit of burnout this year, but I've tried to just like let myself just be a little lazier and let some things go. And I actually already feel like this kind of resurgence of enthusiasm from just doing that for a couple of months. But
let me pause you there, because I think that's a nice little nugget. What stuff you let go that you previously wouldn't have thought you could let go and the world didn't notice?
Yeah, the planting calendar. I didn't look at it for a month, and it was like in the pre-summer, early summer, it was like, this is not the time of year to let up on the gas pedal, but I totally did. And I think our income is going to be, I don't know yet. Obviously, it's only halfway through the year, but I think it might be a little lower this year, and every year before now we've increased. So that will be a disappointment, but that's the big thing I've let go. It's like, it's okay if not every single year is an increase. I had a bit of a rest or whatever. Yeah. So that, probably weeds, picking every single possible crop every single Friday to the maximum amount that I might sell. That's my normal mode. And I've just chilled on that this year a little bit. So yeah, like that.
A lot of wise advice in there for people. I want to thank you for coming on and sharing everything with Alec and I and everybody listening. And yeah, I definitely encourage others, if you have experience or if you're new and you want to come on and join the conversation. I think these have been great. So thank you for reaching out and taking the time.
Yeah, sure. It was super helpful for me to get to talk to some other people about what I do. So appreciate it.
Yeah. And thank you as well you have many more years of experience under your belt than I do. And so it's good to bounce ideas off of people and know that we're in the places that we're winning, that it's like, accept those wins and keep going and be willing to pivot, and nothing's too sacred. No dogma is too sacred to hold on to. So yeah, we'll try to stay in touch, try to keep follow what you're doing, and we'll see how things go in 2025.
Yeah. Best of luck to you, Alec. I think I have high hopes for you. Looks like you're in a good spot. I'm impressed with what you're doing so far. Yeah.
Learning from a lot of different folks like you. So thank you.
Yeah. Great.
And also good on you. Before we go, like, congrats and be proud of yourself for making it 13 years in a sector that people say you can't make a living in, that a lot of people tap out in. That's incredibly hard and it's a grind. So the fact that you've done it for 13 years, that's something to hang your hat on. You're in the OG senior club of doing things, I think. And that's in a good way. Good on you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.